Hello students, welcome to civic class. For today, I will be considering a topic, constitutional development in Nigeria. We'll be looking at how constitution actually developed over a period of time from 1914 to the present period, which is 1999 constitution. We'll be specifically be looking at the 1979 constitution. You have actually told you that following the amalgamation of 1914 by Lord Lugard, that entity called Nigeria was actually brought into a unified entity, whereby the northern and the southern protectorate and the colony of Lagos was actually merged to be called the colony and protectorate of Nigeria. And Lord Lugard actually became the first governor general. And following that, there was the 1922 Clifford Constitution, followed by the 1946 Richard Constitution, and the 1951 Macpherson Constitution, and the 1954 Literature Constitution, and up to the 1960 Independent Constitution and the 1963 Republican Constitution. That was what we actually learned last time, whereby I told you that it actually provided for mostly a Republican system of government and so many other features. But today, we'll be looking at the 1979 Constitution. The 1979 Constitution came as a result of the Constitution of a committee headed by Chief F.R.A. Williams, the then head of state under the Murtala Obasanjo regime. They actually inaugurated a committee, a constitutional drafting committee, or what is known as a constituent assembly. Remember, the committee that in charge of drafting the constitution of a country is called the Constitution Drafting Committee, or you call it the Constituent Assembly. So the then head of state, Murtala Obasanjo administration, they actually considered a 70-man committee that was headed by Chief F.R.A. Williams to actually draft a new constitution for a country that will usher Nigeria into a new democratic dispensation. And the committee actually sat and actually drafted the so-called 1979 Constitution. At our level in JS3, we are only meant to actually understand the basic features of that Constitution. And one of the features of the 1979 Constitution was that it actually introduced a presidential system of government. You know, presidential system of government is actually a system of government whereby the president is both the head of state and the head of government. It was actually unlike the 1963 Constitution that actually provided for a Republican system of government. So the 1979 Constitution actually provided for a presidential system of government. So the head of state is also the head of government, as we actually have it under the 1999 Constitution. In addition, the 1979 Constitution also provided for the office of the vice president and the office of a deputy governor, who is to be nominated by the president from the same political party. You know that in Nigeria, if you are contesting for any elected position as a flag bearer of the party, you are expected to have a running mate. So under the 1979 Constitution, it was actually provided that the president must appoint a person who will actually run alongside with him, either at the state level or the federal level, and that person is expected to contest alongside with him under the same umbrella during the general election that will actually take place. And we also understand further that the 1979 Constitution also provided that the vice president or the deputy governor is expected to actually replace the governor or the deputy governor or the president in the event of death or removal by the legislature through a process known as impeachment. So if peradventure, at the event of a continuation of his tenure, if there's any need or if there's event of death by the president or the governor, the vice president or the deputy governor is expected to replace him under the 1979 Constitution. And if there is any need for an impeachment, you know, impeachment is actually the process of removing either a governor or a president, by members of the legislature as a result of non-performance. So if there's any need for that, the vice president is expected to actually succeed him. You can see that that was exactly what happened in Nigeria during the period that Yar'Adua actually died. Immediately after he died, the then President Goodluck Jonathan was actually the one that succeeded, and that was actually part of the 1990 Constitution as it was in the 1979 Constitution. We'll, on furtherance to our lesson, we also know that another feature of the 1979 Constitution was that it actually specified the functions of the local government. You know that the local government is actually the third level of government. I've told you that the local government is actually headed by the chairman of local government, and we also have supervisory councillors that actually head the various departments at the local government, and we also have the deputy vice councillor. We also have people like let's say the vice chairman of local government and so many other functionaries. So the level of government that is actually conditioned to take care of those activities at the grassroots level. So the local government under the 1979 Constitution was actually given specific functions to actually perform. And again, the 1979 Constitution also provided for separation of power between the three organs of government. You know that in Nigeria we have three organs, or we call it arms of government: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Each of them actually has to ensure that there is a sort of separation of function between the three arms of government, so that none of them will be able to wield so much power. So that separation of power actually helps to ensure checks and balances. Checks and balances is just a principle that provides that the three organs of government actually monitors the activities of one another in order to ensure good performance, or to ensure that none of them actually takes so much or wields so much power. You know, they say that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. So there's need for a check so that none of them will actually misuse power. So the issue of separation of power is just like in a democracy. It's not that there's a big wall that separates the three arms of government. It's just that it's actually designed to show that, to ensure that each of the arms of government actually sticks to the functions assigned to them by the Constitution, so that none of them will actually try to exercise functions that are meant for other organs of government. For, like in Nigeria, if you look at how they check themselves, you see how the legislature actually check the executive through the act of impeachment. So that act of impeachment was actually designed to ensure that the executive performs their functions as stated in the Constitution. And you also see how the executive also try to check the legislature, and also the judiciary. You see how the executive also tries to check the judiciary through the appointment of the Chief Justice of the Federation as the number one head of the legislature, the judiciary, sorry. And we also see how the legislature alongside check the legislature through the approval of the appointment of the Chief Justice of the Federation. And in addition, the 1979 Constitution also provided for the creation of some courts in Nigeria, like the Appeal Court, the High Court, and even the Supreme Court, and actually made the Supreme Court to be actually the highest court of appeal in the country. When we say the highest court of appeal, we're talking of a situation whereby the court that actually gives the final judgment on a particular issue. You know that in Nigeria we have different courts, and cases actually flow as from the lower court up to the upper court. So, for example, you have a case and you approach the customary court. If you actually you are not comfortable with judgment delivered at that court, you can actually progress to magistrate and to the higher court. And if you are not comfortable, still get to the appeal court before you get to the Supreme Court, whereby judgment delivered at the Supreme Court becomes final. And if you're not comfortable like that, it is a sin that you actually approach God for help. So that is that's the stages of a course in Nigeria. So, and you remember, I have told you earlier that not all cases get to the Supreme Court. There are some specific cases that actually get to some cases actually ends at the appeal court stage. So the 1979 Constitution provided for the creation of all these courts like high courts, appeal court, and actually made the Supreme Court the highest court of appeal in the land, and actually empowered the president to also appoint the chief justice of the Supreme Court at that particular. So the president was actually given power to appoint the chief justice of the chief justice of the Supreme Court, who is actually the number one head as far as the judiciary is actually concerned in the country. So the 1979 Constitution another important point that we also need to consider is that the 1979 Constitution also provided for fundamental rights of citizens. So the privileges of citizens were actually encoded in that Constitution. Such rights like right to life, right to freedom of speech, right to freedom of association, ownership of property, and freedom of religion. All these rights were also included in that Constitution of 1979. These are actually designed to actually give the citizens the opportunity to be able to enjoy some of these basic privileges that nature and the law has actually permitted. You know what human rights is? We say there are those freedoms that are actually permitted by law, those freedoms that are actually permitted by law for citizens to enjoy as members of a given society. So those rights are actually included in this Constitution. Okay, so the 1979 Constitution actually has so many features, but at least at this level, we should be able to limit access to these features as far as our level is actually concerned. But remember one thing, that Constitution is actually, as I've said in other previous lessons, is actually one of the futures of a country, particularly a democratic society. And every country must have a constitution, because it's that constitution that actually defines how the day-to-day activities of a government is actually expected to be carried out, and even the rights and duties of citizens actually contained in that constitution. Remember, constitution is defined through so many ways, as we've done in our previous lesson. You can define it as a body of rules and principles that defines how a country is actually to be governed, or a document that contains the rules and regulations of a particular country. So the 1979 Constitution actually subsequently metamorphosed into the so-called 1999 Constitution that we'll treat in our next lesson. Thank you.